Hello, sisters. Welcome to the Sacred Medicine Podcast, weaving powerful, soulful practices into functional medicine. Step into this beautiful space of devotion and explore everything from nurturing foods, rituals, sexuality, and awakening your innate sensuality. It is time to own your radiance. This is the Sacred Medicine Podcast. Hello and welcome back to another week of the Sacred Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Margaret Romero, and this week we have a return guest, Mark Groves. He is a human connection specialist, a writer, a speaker, and coach, and overall really great guy and completely and so knowledgeable about relationships and love. He's just amazing. So this week we are talking about attachment styles. So really interesting. If you don't know what your attachment style is, we talk all about that. And there's anxious, there's secure, and there's avoidant attachment styles. So, and sometimes people can be one of those things all the time, or they can kind of go back and forth between anxious and avoidant. And this is so great to know because it helps you to be able to be in a relationship with someone. Let's say they are opposite of what you are. And so he talks about that and how to deal with it, or how you can, if you're like, I am sick of being either anxious or avoidant, and I just want to be with a secure partner, then we talk about that as well. So this is really an amazing conversation. Mark knows so much, so knowledgeable, throwing wisdom bombs throughout the whole episode. So stay tuned and on to the show. We have a returned guest, Mark Groves. Mark, thank you so much for being here again today.
I'm so excited to be here. I feel like the second time should always be better, like with everything. Like when you lost your virginity, were you really good? I wasn't. But the second time, I still wasn't good. So let's hope that this is better than that.
So we were just starting to jam on something before we head into our attachment styles. You were about to jam on something really good. And we were talking about how I was listening to his Instagram live this morning, and he was talking about we should not accept scraps from people. And then you were just starting to talk about that, how when people first start dating, their best should be there, and when they in the very beginning are just giving you scraps from the very beginning to just, as you put it, fuck that.
yeah. There, now you have an explicit sign on your podcast. I think we all sort of can relate to or understand that when you go on dates, we sort of all joke around as a collective that your representative is going on the date, and some say you're like bringing the guy that doesn't fart and the girl who doesn't poop, and everyone is like at their best. And even that means, what character traits you have, how you handle conflict, those are obviously not coming out, and you're presenting what the best version of you is generally, which can be authentic. I'm not saying that that's inauthentic. It's not. To go and be your best, that's important.
Right.
And if your best sucks, if the person you're dating, their best is actually non-communicative, avoidant, are you fucking kidding me? Like, that's red flag after red flag.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you always have to cut people off or cut them, It's like it invites curiosity, but if it's something right away, like they ask you to do, I laugh because I have this client and I was asked her permission to share a story, and I called it The Tale of Giuseppe. And his real name is Giuseppe. He's on Tinder. So if you see him and he's really attractive, swipe left. So she swipes right to him, but I don't even think he had a written in his profile, which that's a fucking red flag right there. He didn't even take the time to write. He just used his hotness to get swipes. I'm sorry, but that is just like, that right away is a red flag to me.
Right.
She swipes right because her vagina was swiping for her.
Mm-hmm.
And they match. Yay. Oh my God. Like about to have abs and coconut oil all over her, right? And he says, hey, I'd love to get a coffee. I actually love that he went right to let's just meet in person. I think that's great. Now, meet in a public place with lots of people, that's good. Like, I want to meet in a field on a farm. Don't do that. So she says yes. He asks when she's free. She says Thursday and Sunday. No, he doesn't reply. Not till Sunday. And I was like, red flag, swipe left. Like, fuck that. And she
Mm-hmm.
was like, well, and then we talked, and then he said, well, I'm not good at using this app. Oh, I'm not good at using this app. Get the fuck out of here. So then he's like, here's my number. Don't move off the app till someone's earned the right to get your phone number. Never.
Right.
Keep on the app. That's the point of the fucking app. It's safety. It's boundaries.
Yeah.
And so she doesn't give her number. She ends up swiping left. Well, then she sits down and does a meditation. She's like, well, if he comes back into my pile of people, then the universe is saying I need to pursue this. Oh, God. This is like pattern on repeat. So she swipes right because, of course, he shows back up in fucking life because he's Giuseppe.
Right.
He comes back. She swipes right. Match. Oh, my God. His thing is like, hey, And again, like no acknowledgement of the fact that he asked her when she was free, didn't reply. Like there's just no ownership. He's just on there being very superficial. It's pretty clear. There's so many red flags here. She swipes. She ends up blocking him because, again, it's the same annoying dysfunction.
Right.
And then they match on Match.com. And again, he's like, hey, and I'm like, how many times do you need a 2x4 to the head?
Right.
Till you realize that a guy is bad. And I'm like, or a girl is bad. It's just like everybody falls in love with the idea. Like they swipe right and all of a sudden they are imagining their wedding. What is his or her what's his last name? Maybe it will go good with mine. Maybe it's like Harbatini or whatever. I don't know a good Italian last name, but it's so funny because we romanticize this story and then we fall in love with the story instead of seeing who someone is. And very much the biggest thing about dating is we have to recognize, yes, someone's potential. Because people are like, well, everybody needs to grow. Shouldn't we give space for people to grow? Yes. And who the fuck are they being right now? Because if who they're being right now is shitty and they're not moving themselves towards their growth, you're just hoping they do, then you for sure are living in an old pattern and wound that's trying to save people and wish that they would change for you because that would mean that you're worthy of being changed for. And so the real growth is saying, fuck that. It's saying, no, I'm choosing me. Choose yourself. Then you won't seek other people to choose you. You'll stop subcontracting your wounds to other people.
And why do we do that? Why do we try to save people? Where does that come from?
Oh man, I was totally a savior. Not a savior, but like a person who wanted to save people. I was a savior. That sounded like the worst thing. I was Jesus. It was cool for a bit. But walking barefoot was really awful. I used to try to save people all the time. There's a couple reasons. It can be the reliving of a childhood pattern, and that can it could even come from having bullies. It doesn't have to come from home, but it's mostly from home, of like having a parent who we didn't feel attended to, maybe both parents, we didn't feel loved, we didn't feel like we got their attention. So we're trying to heal that through finding people who re-wound us the same, hoping that they'll finally do the thing that we never got, which actually what's happening though is you're being invited to do the thing you never did, which is, as a kid, you couldn't say like, fuck that, dad. Like, you're not showing up, go pound sand. You know what I mean? Like, that's not going to end well. But as an adult, that you have to give a voice to that child, which is, no, that's not okay. You not showing up for me is not okay. You not being a good human being to me is not okay. You not being around when I needed you is not okay. That's where the growth comes. So when people are attracted to unavailable people, I say to them, like, your chemistry is broken. Like, you're attracted to people who are inviting, like, you're eroticizing your pain, essentially. And so you're inviting people into your life who are it's actually working perfectly in that it's attracting you to people who are inviting you to grow and expand in a way that you need to grow and expand if you want to have high functioning relationships. So that's the purpose of relationship, is to heal, is to grow, is to become our best selves. You'll find self-actualization far quicker through relationship than you will through anything else. Because there's no greater magnifying glass to your bullshit than love, really, than a connection.
True. So true.
So that's why we do it. The other reason we do it is because it's an avoidance of being loved. Like, it's actually a strategy to not have someone take care of you and to not have someone love you because you don't believe you're worthy of being loved. So it becomes this sort of like distractive pattern. That was it for me, was like, I was so terrified of being loved because I equated in my subconscious, till it became conscious, I equated when someone loves me, they hurt me. So I'm just going to find people I can love and take care of and fix and heal. And then I'll find my worth in that because they'll need me. And then they can't leave either. But then, of course, inevitably, you help heal them and they move on to the next who's not broken, trying to fix everything. Because who wants someone around them that tries to convince them that they're always broken? Like, you need this, but you need me, but you're not changing, but you didn't do this, but you didn't. Eventually, the person grows from being helped by you. And then it's like, I'm not a fucking project. Like, get off my back. And so that's why they usually leave those situations. Quite a conundrum. Yeah, fucking hell. Quite a conundrum. I've been in it, man. I know that fire. Whew, I hated it and I loved it at the same time, right? It's like a fucked up high.
I mean, listen, it can take years. I mean, how does someone get over this shit? They obviously have to go to therapy or listen to you or your podcast, but how do people really, they can hear it and be like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, like if people fell off their chair listening to that, like, holy fuck, that's me. Here's the thing. Yes, you can go to years of therapy. And I'm not going to say you don't need to do that because you might need to do that. But you don't necessarily need to know where a pattern comes from to know that a pattern's unhealthy. What you need is that your healing has to be more important than living in the pain. You have to find something that matters more to you than your bullshit. Something that when you think about it, you go, fuck, I made a commitment to that. And for me, it was the integrity of my knowledge. That actually became the greatest turning point in my life. Was first when I said, holy shit, I'm responsible for a lot of stuff. Like, I've fucked up a lot. I've done a lot of things. I've said a lot of things. And I had to go through sort of this like storm of shame, of acknowledgement to get to the present moment of who I was actually being. To accept who I was, I had to accept everything I'd done. And that was overwhelming, of course, because it's like a storm where all of a sudden you're like, whew, you take a responsibility for your life. You all of a sudden have to take responsibility for everything. And so that's usually where people don't want to do that. They turn away from that moment. And I turned away from that moment for many years. So I'm not saying that out of judgment. I'm saying it out of experience. Mm-hmm. I just drink away that shame. I'd hump away that shame. Mm-hmm. I'd do anything. I'd chase, women to avoid that shame. I just keep living in the pattern because it was easier to have an orgasm than to deal with my bullshit.
Right.
And that, it's like these reward centers of our brain, these dopamine centers are having us feel connected for a moment, but they're not long-term connections. They're not grounded on anything. They're not foundational. So it's being able to find something that matters to you more than your shit. And what mattered to me more was that I realized that I was making mistakes over and over again and choosing things that hurt me, which were inherently hurting other people. And when I finally paid attention to that, I started to see that my behaviors I was choosing them and they weren't mistakes, that I was actually choosing them. And I had lived in those patterns of choices. And finally, the rule I made was that I would live at my highest level of knowledge always. So as soon as I learned something or fucked up or felt shame or guilt or any sort of incongruence, I would grow and implement whatever the lesson was in that thing. And so I had to go through everything that was painful in my life. So I wrote a list out, everything that I did, every sticky moment of my life. And I was old when I did this, so there was a few. And then in the next column, so you just make a column and you just clear, right? You just write everything that's sticky. Then I made of like, what was the thing that happened? And then the next column was, what was the wisdom within the experience? And then I tore off the wisdom and burned the experiences. And that was very cathartic for me because it was like, I'm keeping the stuff I learned, I'm getting rid of the pain. And that's where I learned that things cease to be painful when you give them purpose. Because all of a sudden, all these moments of like being cheated on, lied to, they didn't matter anymore. They mattered in that they helped me grow. I saw that when I got cheated on and lied to, it was because I had horrible fucking boundaries. It's because I recognized red flags, I just didn't fucking act on them.
Right.
And that's where most people get caught, is like the greatest skill you can build as a dater is getting better at saying no to the wrong people faster. And that will be the greatest transformation anyone makes in dating, is like, why does everyone get the same dating pool and only some people end up in relationships with those fucking people?
Right.
The people that are destructive. And you notice how the people who end up in relationships with people who are destructive end up in relationships always with people who are destructive.
Well, and then also, there's also people who pick really good ones from the same pool.
Yeah,
shitty
exactly. They see something in someone's Tinder profile that is a red flag that someone else codes as possible partner.
Yeah.
And so that's it, is you can teach yourself all of this. That's what the thing is, you don't have to necessarily, again, like with the qualifier, you might need years of therapy, but you don't. Like if you really just want to change your pattern and own your fucking life, you can do it in a moment. You can decide right now, no more. What matters more is finding a great relationship. You have to remember, when you make the call, the decision that you want to find a great relationship, and you tell the universe, I want to find a great relationship, the universe goes, okay, let's get all your fucking ducks in a row. Do you know we're going to have to clear all the things that you need to learn in order to get to that place. And by the way, we're going to send you a bunch of tests to see if you really want what you say you want, because I'm going to give you a Giuseppe. There's going to be 12 abs on this guy. He's going to have extra abs. And he's going to be covered in oil. He's going to offer to massage you, and he's going to be a cunnilingus master. What are you going to do? Right. You're right, because that's like facing the ultimate, I want a relationship. Well, I don't want a relationship right now. That's my Italian / I guess there might have been Spanish in there. But, it's like, so you make an exception, and that exception is saying you actually don't believe you're worthy of the thing you say you want. Mm-hmm. And that's how consistent we have to be, because humans, your belief is as powerful as your weakest choice.
Yeah.
So anything you choose that contradicts a belief you want to create means the belief doesn't exist.
I love it. Well, let's hop into attachment styles, because I love this topic. I know you've talked about this before. There's a book as also that I was reading. I think you recommended it. I forget the name of it now and who
Attached.
It's by.
Attached by Amir Levine. And I always forget the co-author. Yes. I feel bad because that co-author's never been mentioned. So we'll put in the show notes.
It'll be in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah. We got to give that person some love, I always remember the first name.
So I already know what style I am. So I'd love for you to just kind of talk to us about this and tell us what the two attachment styles are.
Well, so
three.
Attachment first, the idea of attachment, your attachment system is a radar that is looking for the safety and security in all relationships, not just romantic relationships. Essentially, what an attachment style does is it systemizes or organizes how we connect with other human beings. And it does a pretty good job because people sort of like fit in one box or the other, or a bit in both. So there's three types of attachment. There's, you're talking about the insecure attachment styles. There's two types, but so we go, the research is actually done based on looking at how a mom and a toddler that's where the research originally
Right.
came from. They observed a toddler playing in a room, mom in the room, mom leaves the room, mom comes back, and they see how the toddler behaves when mom comes back. So mom leaves the room, mom comes back, baby's distraught, reconnects with mom, is upset, doesn't want to leave mom. That's called anxious attachment style, afraid that when mom leaves, mom doesn't come back. Mom leaves, mom comes back, baby's like, didn't even notice mom was gone, big fucking deal, no biggie. Mom comes back, doesn't give a shit, is like acting nonchalant, and that's called avoidance. But now what we see is that the child who's in that avoidance state, who's acting like it doesn't matter, is actually physiologically responding like the anxious baby. It's just expressing differently. It's expressing as disassociation from the mom. The third type, mom leave, mom come back, baby reunites with mom, baby goes on and plays. So that's secure attachment. Mom leaves, mom comes back, I trust mom will come back. I trust mom. So the research shows that how we attach as a child is connected to how we attach as an adult. I think there's some really important caveats here. One is your attachment system is really actually very important. It's constantly surveying to make sure you're safe. So when your attachment system goes off, it's important to pay attention. Now, if we have sort of like our radar is too sensitive, if we're anxious, then we just need to learn how to pay attention to it, but also recognize where it miscodes something that maybe is a 2 out of 10 as a 10 out of 10, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like being able to learn that. And I think when we can systemize it, that's when people can start to go, oh, this is just my attachment system. It's not who I am, which is different. Even when we identify what type of attachment system we use or what type of attachment style, we are, it's recognizing that you can actually create security, that everyone can change their attachment system. That's important to know. It's like You don't have to, you can literally in this moment decide to be secure forever. And I know that sounds very simplified because, of course, if you're anxious or avoidant, there's work that needs to be done, and people can pivot between the two. So, and before I go to that, it's one of the defining characteristics of a secure attachment is that my partner's needs matter as much as my own, not more than my own, and my needs don't matter more than theirs. So see that like yours still matter, not just theirs, and theirs still matter, not just yours. Okay. So it's just being able to recognize that. The reason that people can pivot, and a good way to understand this is, let's say you're very anxious and you're chasing someone, you're in a relationship with someone who's maybe an addict or something like that. You get so hurt by it that when that relationship ends, you enter a relationship with someone who's chasing you and you're very unavailable. You just can't seem to want to turn towards love. You become avoidant. So what happens a lot of the times is that people pivot from one of those to the other because they haven't actually learned how to create a secure attachment. So they just oscillate between avoidance and anxious. I really love you. I want to be with you. I got you. Oh shit, what the fuck do? I'm running from you. All right. So that's that pattern. So that pattern is, it's sort of like when you look at the idea of codependence. It's just another way of systemizing anxious avoidance and attachment systems. It's just another way of saying this is how relationships organize. In codependence, someone is often chasing needs. The other person is needing to be fixed, is usually the addict or the narcissist or the whatever. And so you sort of see like this pattern where empaths date people who are narcissistic. Although I don't really agree with the mass production of the word narcissist that we use now, because we're using it like it's fucking everybody is one. And we all have, potential to be narcissists, potential to be empaths. I think it's that when we use the word narcissist, it's a really popular song that people are singing. Mm. And what it does is it recuses the empathic person of having boundaries and paying attention to red flags. So, sometimes a person will have boundaries and say, I don't want what you want. I don't want a relationship, but I'll have sex with you. And the person goes, I dated this narcissist. And it's like, no, you dated someone who told you the truth. You just didn't like the truth and you didn't listen. And now you're the victim. Right. And it's like, own your shit. I see that one so much where someone's like, I date assholes. And I'm like, how long did you date them for? Oh, 6 months. So nowhere in 6 months was there a red flag. Like,
Right.
come on. I bet I could identify a red flag on their profile.
Now, what if you date someone that does this push-pull thing all the time? Do you, and they don't really recognize it, and they may or may not, it may or may not change. So you just decide to end the relationship, I assume. Is that, or what happens
Well,
next?
I think it's being able to recognize, first off, you could do the quiz. It's free on, I forget what it's the website for the book attached by Amir Levine. That book. The website has a free attachment quiz that will also, you can do your partner or your past partner's attachment style. And that will, and that will allow you to understand yourself. Because I promise you that if you are in a relationship with someone who oscillates between the two, or you're in a relationship with someone who's anxious, you might be a bit avoidant. And if you're in a relationship with someone who's avoidant, you might be a little anxious. Remember, dating someone, it's kind of like, there's a couple things. One is, we attract and sort of fit into puzzle pieces in a relationship. Like I said before, if you're dating people who are unavailable, you're trying to heal something from your childhood. That's exactly like, if you're chasing people who are unavailable, you're probably anxious. That's just, your attachment style is anxious. If you're someone who thinks people love too much and they're overwhelming, and when you get in a relationship, people are too needy, then you're probably avoidant. If you find that you can't get into a relationship for a long time, you don't go past many first dates, it's being able to recognize where your standards actually walls. And all of this is really increasing your own relational IQ, your own relational awareness, your awareness about how you show up to the puzzle piece, to say, like, all relationships are my shit plus your shit, and together they make our shit. And when you could clean up your own yard, your own side of the fence, then you can start to point fingers. But till you're cleaning up your own shit, start to recognize that how your partner behaves is usually in relationship to how you behave. Because we're never not in relationship.
Right.
So being able to say, okay, well, when I am overtly pursuant, people withdraw. Well, then I must be doing something. Like, if people always leave me, what am I doing? I'm the common denominator.
Right.
If I'm always getting cheated on, where is my part of this? And that's where we start to get really hyper responsible for our own behavior. And sometimes that requires sort of like going into our own dojo, going into our own space and really doing the work. And you can do that within a relationship. But what often happens when people are single is they get real good at being single, and they clean up their stuff, and then they get in a relationship and they're like, holy shit, I thought I fixed this. And it's being able to recognize that, like, till you're in a relationship to another, your boundaries really are nothing yet. Like, if you have a boundary with like a friend, that's great. But when your heart's on the line, everything sort of up levels. Because it really triggers a lot deeper stuff, because your heart's on the line, because there's an idea of rejection, abandonment, this idea of re-triggering old things. And when things get triggered, you have the opportunity to heal them. That's why I love relationship. I think when I am triggered, I like just thank my partner, like, oh, fuck, there's another thing, like, it's like the onion. Now I used to think of it as being this onion that you like unlayer, and then you're like, God damn it, this onion doesn't get smaller. But I was talking to Sherry Salata, who used to be the executive producer of Oprah. She's just so amazing. And she said, maybe think about it as expansion. Every time you figure something out, you're actually growing and expanding. The onion isn't staying, you're not, I think about it as like, people need to recognize that they're not a problem waiting to be solved.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when we feel like we're going to have to do years of therapy, it's like there's sort of like a cultural idea that we need to go deep into the Himalayas and spend years there or like deep into the chair, but you can move through things really quickly if you want to. If you're committed to yourself and you have a good teacher, you can move really quickly. If you're around people who value what you value, who have relationships you want to have, you'll learn from them very quickly, because your subconscious will pick up the patterns of their communication, how they exist in the world. And then sort of like it's not a hack. It's like literally the people you surround yourself with, you want them to be ever inviting you to expand and grow. And that really is such a symbol. You watch people who love each other, who treat each other with respect, who care for each other, and you just start to emulate them, and you'll be them, right? It's like you'll be you, but you'll have their skill set just by, the next time you get into conflict, it's never too late or too early to say sorry. It's never an issue to build a bridge where you used to build a wall, it's never, too late to do that. And when people start to see that, that's a huge transformation.
Wow. So going back to the attachment style. So let's say
Let's
say we identify like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm anxious, or no, I'm totally avoidant. What does one do? Because you said in one moment you can just kind of decide that you don't want to be that way, but I feel like that could be really difficult to do.
Yeah, of course. Well, the first part of identifying even what your shit is, I think that is all of a sudden we often have, like I know I did, is I was like, oh my God, I've done that so many times. Like it's like this, as I said earlier, is like there's this wave, like a Rolodex of memories of all the times you did the thing that you just learned. So for anxious people, it's about taking a step back. I like to tell people that it's like, instead of thinking about your attachment system or your growth being about your relationship to the other person and how you relate to them, think about it being how you relate to the space between you and another person. Because ultimately, if you look at the different ways we systemize or categorize relationship, all of them have this thing where it's like, it's all about how we respond to possibly someone stepping away from us or someone stepping close to us, right?
Right.
So when you look at even codependency, it's because each person requires each other. They're not separate entities. The relationship has consumed them. They are their relationship. So when the relationship's not doing well, they're not doing well. When their partner's upset, they become upset. Everything pivots off each other. Their identity becomes lost within the relationship. So it's really about being able to hold on to who you are as you fall in love. That's really what this work is all about, is how do you hold on to your own identity and your own freedom and your own passions and your own needs as you love someone else? Because the model of all relationship up until not so recently was give away who you are for the purpose of marriage. And marriage was an evolutionary, systemized, categorized thing that was about, keeping rich people rich, keeping poor people poor. So creating hierarchies within the society. You married someone at the farm next to yours. You married someone in a family that was prestigious to keep the prestigious name. Even in Hindu culture with the caste system, you married in your caste. So and all religions and all humans had castes and still do. So it's just a simpler way to understand it in the Hindu religion. So when we can start to recognize that everything you've been taught, you're actually going against by holding on to who you are, pursuing your own passions, caring about your partner's passions and their dreams and their individuality, and that how you do it is you start to look at how you relate to your needs and your identity as you're in love with someone else. And so you look at the space between them. So if your default is anxious, you look at the space between you and the other person and you feel into how it feels when there is 5 feet between you. I don't mean literally, although literally that would be a good exercise. And if they take a step back, how do you feel? But figuratively, when they're not texting you constantly and there's not constant contact, what does your body feel like? And feel into that, because there's grief there, there's loss there, there's rejection there, there's undealt with emotion. in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And when you pay attention to the emotion that comes up when you don't fucking chase, when you don't do the thing that you always do that perpetuates the cycle to avoid being rejected, that ensures you get rejected. And when you don't do that thing, then you have to sit with yourself. And you probably will be doing that for the first time since you were fucking 3.
Right.
And that is why it's hard, is because you're going to have to listen and feel things that you've been trying to cover up with people, with sex, with drugs, with alcohol, and with busyness, with the internet, with fucking Instagram. You know, like dopamine. Because it's like, I don't want to deal with my shit. Because I don't know how. Because I'm scared. Because it's a lot. And that's okay. It is a lot. The first time I was trying to heal my anxiety, my anxious attachment, I realized that the question I had to do, again, right, it's like, I made a rule. I will always live at my highest level of knowledge, and that is connected to my integrity. Integrity for me is my highest core value. So I know that if I know something and I don't change, then I'm out of integrity. And that matters more to me than anything else. Because my relationship to myself matters more to me than anything else. Mm-hmm. So I sat there. I'll never forget it. I think I was at my parents' house, which is weird, but I was sitting on the couch at their house. I don't know why I was at my parents' house. That's weird, but I was. And maybe I was visiting them. And I remember thinking to myself, if I was enough, what would I do right now? Would I send this message? Would I not? And the answer was, you wouldn't. And I was like, no. But like, it doesn't matter. You can't over-text someone who likes you. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you actually can. Yeah, you can. You could talk too much about stuff. You can be too needy. You can be... Now, don't get me wrong. People go, well, you can't be too needy. That shames needs. Yes, and. Like, when your needs come from a very insecure place, then they're not confident needs. They're not true needs. They're needs that are trying to cover up pain and grief. And so I sat through it and I didn't send the message. And then the next time I wanted to talk about something that was coming up for me, I said, if I was enough, would I have this conversation? And right away, my gut was like, yes. And I was like, God damn it. I don't want to have this conversation, right? You know, because it's a hard conversation. And then I called my partner, Kai, and I was like, hey, like, this is coming up for me and blah, 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 blah. And I started to realize that we're all attached to the outcome. I need them to have the conversation with me back. I need them to recognize and honor this thing. No, the victory isn't in that. The victory is in the process. The victory is in the giving yourself the voice. The victory is in the cultivating your self-worth from within by saying, if I was enough, would this matter? And sometimes it won't. Right. And sometimes it will. But the thing is that no matter the answer to both, a piece of you will die in that moment, and it's going to suck. It sucked. I was like, fuck. This feels like my gut is like, ugh. Right. Because there's a little kid in me who's going like, I don't feel attended to. I've never felt attended to. Like, why have you been running from your needs? And I'm like, oh, because I don't want to listen. You know, like, I don't want to feel what loss feels like. I don't want to feel what heartbreak feels like. And that, when you sit in that moment, and just that acknowledgement is such expansion.
Well, if you recognize this in a partner, let's say you're secure, but your partner has one of these. How do you manage that?
Well, the first thing is I would want to know where it comes from, because you have to remember that anyone's response to conflict that is, you know, because most of us are taught how to respond to conflict from our parents, you know, from observing. And so the first thing I would want to know and develop right away is compassion for that's the way that they handle fear and potentially being hurt. So when you start to see your partner's responses as a way of protecting themselves from pain, and you get curious, because we often make their response about us. It's not about us. Like when you look at, Harville Hendricks has some research that he quotes in his book, Getting the Love You Want. And that's a fantastic book if you want to like totally matrix next level your relationship. But in his book, he talks about how all conflicts are actually 10% about what's actually going on and 90% old shit.
Mm.
And so when you can show up to your conflict and how you handle it, any sort of trigger or disagreement, and you start to get curious with one another, man, why did I get reactive there? So like when we first started dating, she was quite avoidant. And I can say that with permission. And she was quite avoidant. I remember on our second date, we were hiking. Maybe it was like her third date. And I said to her, what do you need from a relationship? And she was like, I don't need anything. And I was like, oh, Lord. Like I'm dating Beyonce over here,
Right.
And now she's got plenty of needs. But, at the time, no one had asked her that. And like the last time she had been in a relationship before me, she had been married and she had gotten divorced. So like I had to hold compassion for that in that moment. But I could tell you I was triggered with that answer. And I said to her, I'm triggered right now. It was like on our drive, I had learned, when I was young, if I was upset and driving, I used to just drive fast, hoping they'd ask what's wrong with me, which is so stupid. But I grew and expanded. And I was in the car and I was like, I feel triggered right now because when I asked you what you need and you said you need nothing, I feel like that means you don't need me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like this bridge where there used to be a wall. My wall used to come up and I used to withdraw, but I was building a bridge. And I started, before I started dating her, although with her too, I cultivated at a much deeper level, is like how someone responds to my openness, because I've really cleaned up how I communicate. That's not all, that wasn't always true for sure. Because if old partners of mine are listening, they're like, yeah, sure you did. It takes concerted effort. And I know that my delivery was vulnerable and open and inviting her there. If she couldn't step towards that, that's not about me. And that's why the internal personal work is so important, because when you're asking, like, when you notice your partner is anxious or they're avoidant, it's being able to call them towards you in a way that's gentle. Like when someone's avoidant and you're chasing them, they can't step into space they don't have to step into.
Right.
That's why the most attractive thing to someone who's avoidant is space for them to be themselves, so they can actually, but you have to invite them there and they have to choose to step towards it. The challenge with avoidance is it requires the other person to get vulnerable and open to that love has seriously hurt them. For the anxious person, you can do your work very much by just acknowledging where your anxiety chooses for you. Your anxiety is the same feeling that someone who's avoidant would get. It would just code differently. They just withdraw instead of chase. That's all. So both people will have a visceral body experience that will say something's up. That doesn't go anywhere. I work with plenty of people who have said like, but I don't want to feel that way anymore. And I'm like, yes, you do. Because that's your attachment system saying something's up. You don't want that to go away. That's your power. That's what makes you a powerful human being, because you can feel other people and you can feel yourself, and you know when you're abandoning yourself. And so you need to listen to it. It's just what you do with it that's different. That's all. You just choose a different behavior that's connective to yourself first, so you feel connected to you and protected and connected to another person. But the protection of yourself is first and foremost, always. Always.
Wow. So
I hope that makes sense.
it does. It does. And so also, so if you are either secure or anxious or avoidant, and do not want to be like that anymore and want to pick a secure partner, do you need to become secure from anxious or avoidant? Do you need to become secure in order to find a secure partner?
Well, you can become secure together. You can find a secure partner. You can be this, it is a secure partner to say like, hey, I notice you're anxious or you're like feeling. I remember when my ex-girlfriend from when I was younger, I remember going away on a trip for 3 months or a year, or sorry, 3 months or a year, 3 weeks or a month. I was just away for a little bit. And I went to another continent, and the last boyfriend that she had when he went to another continent had cheated on her. And so I knew that she had an anxiety about that. And in order to calm that anxiety, I wasn't going to over accommodate it so that I still needed to invite her to a healthy place of trust, because I'm not inheriting someone else's distrust,
Right.
But I said to her, I get that's what do you need to feel secure while I'm traveling? And we did that. We had FaceTime calls, and because part of her healing is my work too. What a gift to give someone their healing through you. If you're dating someone who got cheated on before, you chose that in your partner. You're attracted to that. It is your work as a partner to help them expand. And it doesn't mean that they have the right to read your stuff because their past partner cheated. It means that you can say, what do you need from me in order to feel safe?
I like that so much.
Well, that creates security right there, because their needs matter.
Right.
And that for people will be evolutionarily mind-blowing, because no one's ever cared about what I need.
Yeah.
That's why love is so transformational. Anytime someone says to me, I just don't need a relationship, I'm like, there's so much avoidance in that statement. It doesn't mean I can't honor that you've probably been through a lot of shit and probably dealt with some really annoying partner or someone where you completely lost yourself. But completely losing yourself and then never allowing yourself back into connection means that you still haven't built the skills to learn how to hold on to you as you love another. And so what I see most people do is they're way too open, because I feel like this is a great way to understand it, is they're doormats, they're too nice, they're over pursuant, they identify as empathic. And then they get hurt, and then they close off, and they're unavailable, and they still haven't learned how to stay open and feel protected. They only know how to be closed and protected, or open and vulnerable to hurt.
Okay.
And so that's exactly like being anxious versus being avoidant. It's the exact same pattern and system. It's just sort of voiced in a different way, which might help other people understand. They're like, that's what I do. I'm a doormat, and then I shut down and I withdraw. I go from anxious to being avoidant, which is really it. And so what most people don't know is how to have great boundaries. Boundaries are everything. You want to have a good life, just have good boundaries. If you have good boundaries, you will be the happiest human on the planet. Your self-worth will be bulletproof, because you'll be the curator of everything that gets into your life. You'll trust yourself. I mean, that's everything. You don't lose yourself in love. That if you can learn how to have great boundaries, you'll destroy in a good way, not a bad way.
Yeah. I love that. I love that when you have the boundaries, you're a creator of your own life and what happens, rather than kind of being the doormat and allowing things to just happen, or assholes to come in and do whatever they want. And I love that. There's been so much, and a lot of us, including myself, never really learned that as a child or growing up in a family. There were no boundaries at all, ever. And I never really learned how to have them and have them be so strong as I have them today. And that was not taught in my household whatsoever.
Well, which makes so much sense, because for most people, their parents violated their boundaries. Their parents had poor boundaries. Even if your mom or dad read your journal, that's a huge violation of a boundary. Mm-hmm. Reading anything of yours, that's a big violation of a boundary. Obviously there's physical boundaries like trauma. Those are huge violations of boundaries. There's spiritual boundaries. You need to believe what I believe. Think about being born into religious families. You don't
Right.
choose your spiritual practice. You get born into one, and it might not be congruent with who you are. You might feel like it isn't. And so a huge spiritual boundary has been violated, which is you believe what I believe. And if you don't believe what I believe, I don't love you. And there's so much inherited trauma from extreme religion.
Oh,
I
yeah.
grew up Catholic, so shit, I know that one well.
Me too. I still get shit for that too, because I don't
Oh,
go to
I'm a recovering
church. I
Catholic.
don't do any of that stuff.
See, now I'm at the point where I have a healthy relationship to my spirituality. I still get triggered by religious beliefs that are not rational, like where they actually are the opposite of unconditional love and they try to masquerade it in religion. That really bothers me because if your God turns away from people, then that's not God. That for me that's a hard and fast rule that if your God doesn't embrace kindness and acceptance of everything, then that to me doesn't feel like God. Why would God want that? That
Right.
doesn't make sense to me. Like I have a couple friends who, when they got divorced, their families disowned them. Are you kidding me? Like the very thing of that drives me fucking nuts. It's
Right.
like you made your God more important than your child, than their vulnerability, than their hurt, than their loss, and you made it about you. Like, get the fuck out of here. That bothers me so much.
Yeah. 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 I hear you. I hear you.
Man, I could go on a tirade about that, so I won't.
Oh my gosh, Mark, this is already sort of coming down to the end of our conversation. That happened really fast.
Yeah, it did. Hey, oh my god, that was fun though.
So much fun. So, how can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram if you want a dopamine hit. Create the love. Twitter, same thing. My website is markgroves.tv. I'm going to probably be doing a speaker tour in April. So I'm just going to be going across the States and Canada to just do some talks just on my own, which I'm really excited about.
Nice.
I've been waiting to do that, so I'm really pumped about that. And yeah, I'm really excited. This is 2019. I'm going to be launching some courses on with my partner, and one's going to be on how to create the love, how to find it, and the
Nice.
other one's going to be on how to reboot the love. So like, if you're in a relationship, even if you just started dating, how do you get aligned?
Yeah.
And if you have been dating for a long period of time or married and you want to revitalize, how do you do that? It's going to be, that to me is like everything, it's like, how
Gold.
do you do that?
Yeah.
Yes, to me, that's like, bam, that's like what we need to know all the time. And there's a great quote from Alexander Salmon, and I don't know all of it because it's fairly long, but it says like the marriage you need at 25 is very different than the marriage you need at 35 and 40 and 50 and 60. And so you'll have many marriages to the same person.
Mm.
And I love that because we're
Yeah.
always changing. And like when I look at my partner, I'm not looking at her as a static one identity. She's invited, embraced to shift always. And I think maybe the greatest thing I've learned in my more recent years, I was going to say my senior years, but I'm not a senior. I don't want to put myself there yet. No offense if you're a senior listening. I'm not ready for that. But in the last 3 years, one thing that I've really learned in relationship is that I never want a relationship to feel like a prison, like I have to,
Right.
that like, the reality is that someone can leave you in any moment. That's just actual reality. So you have to connect with that. And that alone, just connecting to that is saying like, I always want you to choose to be here. And if you ever feel compelled to choose not to, that's okay. Because that's where freedom really is like, whether someone wants to, like someone will leave if they want to anyways. So why not just embrace the fact that like, this is a choice for you and it's not a prison. You don't have to be here.
Mm-hmm.
You're free to come and go, and I will always love you no matter what you choose. And that was a huge shift for me. Oh my
That's
God.
beautiful. Yeah.
Well, then your relationship doesn't feel like a have to. It feels like a get to. It feels like a choose to.
Yes.
And that's where you hold on to who you are, and your relationship becomes a separate identity that is not part of you, but instead something that you feed, something that you nurture. It's a separate organism that requires its own care and attention. And that's the connection between you and another, which is not to be confused with you. That's different. So I hope everyone enjoyed, and if anyone got triggered, good.
Tell us about your podcast.
Oh yeah, my podcast just launched, just like a month and a bit ago, and
Congrats.
It's called the Mark Gross Podcast. Thank you. I had been, actually, some of the first recordings I did a year ago. That's how long it took me to just frickin' do it. So, God, I'm like, I saw, my friend was like, you said you were going to launch this a while ago. I was like, fuck, I did. I better launch it. And then I did. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's a deep dive into all thing human. And, it's not just about romantic love. It's about relationship to self. It's about, all those sorts of things. So please check it out. You can find it on all the places where you can find podcasts.
Is it mostly solo with just you, or are you interviewing people as well?
Up until this point, only interviews.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I'm really pumped. It just happened. So I'm just sort of like keeping my eye. I mean, you've been running yours for a while. I'm just getting into this world.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and like having a good mic, and like my audio guy's like, yo, the audio recording wasn't very good on that last one. I was like, I'm sorry, audiophile. If he's listening to this, I'm sorry, but you're critical of my audio quality, which is of course important. But yeah. So I'm pumped. I'm excited. So if people check that out, that'd be great.
All right. Listen,
awesome.
Mark.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. And maybe I'll see you when you're back in New York. If you're doing any tours in the East Coast, I'll come by.
Yeah, I'll be in New York for sure. It'd be great to see you again.
Yeah, I'll keep you posted. We'll connect on Instagram.
Sweet, sounds good.
All right, have a good one, Mark. Take care. Well, I hope you loved this conversation with Mark. He always delivers such great information. And for more information about him and for all the show notes, head on over to margaretromero.com/episode 106. And if you love this episode or you love the podcast, head on over to iTunes and leave a review. For all of those of you who may or may not be following me yet on Instagram, I am doing those somewhat daily posts on there, a lot about food and cooking and some functional medicine as well as sacred practices. So you can find me at Margaret Romero on Instagram. And I will talk to you all next week. Bye for now.